Alright, so today we're going to be reviewing simplifying exponential expressions, which we did some in Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. So we're going to have to recall our exponential rules, which is something we did review in Algebra 2. So I'm not going to spend a day on reviewing that. I'm just going to kind of remind you of the rules as we go. So number one, start off with a simple one. One thing we need to remember is that, first off with our numbers, whenever we have two numbers being multiplied, doesn't change how we do it. So 3 times 2 gives me 6. And then when I have a common base, when I have two common bases, both with exponents, we combine the powers by adding. Okay, so both v's, I have two v's, v and v, both are to the third power. So really we're just asking how many total v's do we have. So we have a total of 6 v's. And there's no more simplifying to do, so that's our answer. So there's a simpler one. So we're going to move on to some more complex ones. Okay, so whenever we have a parenthesis and there's a power outside the parentheses, well, I want to simplify inside the parenthesis first. So we see inside our parentheses that we have a negative x to the third and also a positive x to the negative fifth. We just treat that, these are still common bases, so we can combine there. It's just kind of like having a negative 2 times a positive 2. We just see if there's only one negative, it stays negative. If there's both terms that are negative, then it's going to turn back to a positive. So what we're going to do here is combine our x's. I have a negative x and a positive x, so they're going to stay negative x. And then when I combine my powers, 3 and negative 5, I have a total of negative 2 x's. And then there's nothing to combine my y's with, so I have all that to the second power times negative y x squared. So now I'm ready to use my exponent outside my parentheses because there's no more simplifying inside. So I'm taking negative x to the second power. So negative x times negative x is going to give me positive x, and then negative 2, if ever I have a power to a power, so negative 2 to the second power, all I do is multiply my powers. So negative 2 times 2 is negative 4. And then I have y, 5 times 2 is 10. And then now we are combining with my second term. So x to the negative fourth and then another x squared, two common bases, we combine our powers. So that gives me a total of negative 2 x's. And then I have y to the 10th and a negative y. So again, still common bases, but we have a negative in front. So only one negative, we keep it negative. And then I have y to the 10th and then a y to the first, and when I combine those I get y to the 11th. Now if you remember, we cannot have a negative power, so there's only one thing to do here. I need to move my negative x to the negative second to the bottom, so the whole thing's still going to stay negative. So I have negative y to the 11th over x squared as my final answer. Number 3. Okay, number 3, we have x to the negative fifth, y to the third, all to the fourth power times negative x to the 0 power, y to the fifth, all to the fifth. So if we look inside both parentheses, there's no simplifying to do inside the parentheses, so we're ready to go ahead and use our power outside of the parentheses. So x to the negative fifth to the fourth, we multiply, and that gives me x to the negative 20th. And then I have y to the third to the fourth, and that gives me y to the 12th, times I have a negative x to the 0, y to the fifth power. Now, we have to remember that x to the 0 power, anything to the 0 power is always 1. It's going to be very important to remember while we're doing our exponential expression simplifying. So I have negative x to the 0 to the fifth is just going to be negative x to the 0, and you can really change that to 1 whenever you'd like, which obviously if it's just 1 we don't really need to list it. So I'll carry it on for now. So y to the fifth is y to the 25th. Now we're ready to combine. So again, I have a positive x and a negative x, so it's like x times negative 1, so it's going to be negative out in the front. It's the only negative in the entire expression. And then x to the negative 20th combined with x to the 0 is still x to the negative 20th. And then I have y to the 12th times y to the 25th. If I combine my powers, I get y to the 37th. Just like my last problem, if I have a negative exponent at the end, we're going to move it to the bottom, leaving y to the 37th on the top. And there is our final answer there. All right, so getting into some problems with some division. Again, we always want to look to simplify inside of parentheses first. So there isn't any to do. We only have an x and a y variable that can't be combined. So I'm going to rewrite x to the negative third, y to the 0, and then times x to the second power is x squared, and then y to the negative third to the second is y to the negative sixth. And that is all over 2x to the 0. So now we're simplifying in the numerator. So I have x to the negative third and x to the second, so a total of negative 1 x's. And then y to the 0, and then y to the negative 6 combined just to y to the negative sixth. Still all over 2x to the 0. Again, we remember that x to the 0 is just 1. Even if you're thinking combine it with your numerator x, it's not going to change the power. If we have the same base in the numerator and the denominator, we combine by subtracting. So negative 1 minus 0 would still be negative 1. So now I have x to the negative first, y to the negative sixth, all over 2. We cannot have a negative power, so what we need to do is move everything with a negative power to the denominator. So when I do that, I have 2x to the first, y to the sixth. And we cannot forget about our numerator. So since nothing's left, we just need to leave a 1 up there, and that'd be our final 1 over 2x y to the sixth. Okay, so we have simplifying to do inside of parentheses here before I mess with my negative 3 as my exponent outside the parentheses. So I have negative x and a positive x. So again, we just see how many signs that are negative. If we only have 1, it's going to stay negative x. Then I have negative 2 on the first power and then negative 1 the other one. Negative 2 plus negative 1, or a total of negative 3 x's. And then y to the negative first, y to the third gives me a total of y squared. That's all to the negative third power. So we could move everything to the denominator, make it a positive 3, or you can just apply the power and then move things that are negative to the numerator or denominator when need be. So I'm just going to go ahead and apply the negative 3. So since it's an odd power, when you multiply here, it's going to stay negative x. If it was a positive power or a even power, it would change negative x to a positive x. So it's going to be negative x, negative 3 times negative 3 is positive 9, and then I have y to the negative sixth. And now my parentheses really aren't going to do anything. So my entire answer is going to be negative. I need to move y to the sixth to the denominator. So my final answer is negative x to the ninth over y to the sixth.